Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our reopening task force meeting for Wednesday, June 30th. Famous day in the life of schools. This is the end of our fiscal year. Those in the former business office official as I am, we always look forward to these days. Big day tomorrow, new fiscal year. So thank you all for being here today and for taking some time out of your summer to be here. So the purpose of our meeting today is to hear from each of our various subgroups and committees the initial feedback about our main questions, our major questions for this reopening process. I believe every subcommittee was able to meet in the interim period. We had several weeks in between this meeting and the last. And so today I'll just be gathering that feedback and asking some clarifying questions as we go around. Some of the feedback I've already received directly from some of the committee chairs, which was very helpful. Thank you for that. But today, again, is really just to get that initial feedback. And just to review the process with everybody, between now and July 14th, I will draft a reopening plan, and I will provide that plan to our committee at our next meeting on July 14th. And if I have it done sooner, I'll provide it to you sooner than that. And then we're going to ask you to meet with your subcommittee again between July 15th and the 20th to gather feedback on that first draft of the plan. So if you've not already scheduled your next subcommittee meetings, you might want to do that so that people have some advance notice about that. On July 21st, we'll meet again as a group and again gather the feedback from the subcommittees about that draft plan. And then August 4th, I will bring a revised plan to this committee for your final approval. So again, that's the process thus far. So with that said, I will jump right in and give each subcommittee some time to share their feedback. You can certainly share the feedback if there's a lot of detail or information and you have it in a document somewhere. Feel free to provide that either in the Trello board or emailing me or whatever you'd like to do. And then today, if you want to summarize some of the key points for each of the major questions, that'd be very helpful. So that would be great if we could do that. And then what I'll do is I'll provide some questions that I might have on the feedback. And then anyone else from the group can certainly do that as well. So we have, let's see, 7 major questions and 5 or 6 subcommittees. So some math, 7 times 6, I think is Maddie Daniel can probably help me with that. I think it's 40 something.
42, I think, Adam. 42.
I appreciate that. That was a validation of you being community council moderator this year. You had to know that math question. So I don't want us to spend more than 5 or 10 minutes on each subcommittee. So if you feel yourself going into the 10 to 15 minute range, maybe pull back a little bit just to honor all of our time together. So with that said, is there a subcommittee that would like to go first? Hearing none, I'm happy to call on people. So first on the list and first in our hearts, the school nurses, Deanna Quartz.
Thank you, Adam. The questions that you had asked us to talk about in our medical group were what we think about continuing with the daily COVID screening and how to handle potential need for quarantine for students and or staff, should it need to be. In our discussion, we felt that the daily screening was something that, although in its best form would be great, there's unfortunately not someone that can be available to find out who hasn't answered their screening consistently and then get that to the school nurses in a timely manner. So when this school year, some of the info we were getting of people that hadn't finished their screenings, we didn't get to check on the kids for a while because of our regular work too. So it was very difficult. So if that's something that you want to continue as a district, I think we need to have someone that's their responsibility to check on those screenings, assure that they're done, check with the students or staff. It's very difficult. And we're trying to take the staff's word, honesty, if they've had vaccines, they didn't have to do it at the end. So I think it kind of got a little bit lax for other staff as well, but hopefully that would be something that you'll consider in your plan. And then we talked about for if there was a quarantine that should have to happen due to someone having COVID vaccine and exposing others. We asked staff this year to give us a copy of their vaccination, proof of vaccination, and we have kept those on file in the nurse's office solely. They're not at the district office, just with the nurses, which is helpful to us. If we do have to quarantine, we can look up and see if a staff member is quarantined. So we will ask for that again. It's a voluntary basis. For students, we thought that would be kind of an overwhelming task if we were to all of a sudden get all of this information in, have to deal with that. So what our thought as the nurses was, if we do have to quarantine, we can then ask for verification of COVID vaccination documentation and not have to keep track of that other than that. And then there was one other problem that I want to make sure is addressed. If with mask wearing, you know, that's a great mitigation. We've already done away with it the end of the school year. So I think that might be something hard to add back on. We would like to see it as continue on a voluntary basis. If people want to be vaccinated, want to wear their masks, that should be an option for them. If the one thing with the elementary school that's unique to the other schools compared to the other schools is that the children in our schools age 12 and under cannot be vaccinated. So that's going to be a big question as to what the best route for that is of wearing masks or not. I think parents at this point, from what I've heard from parents when we were at the end of the year, is thank God we didn't have to wear masks anymore and we'll take our chances type thing. Most of the staff is vaccinated, so I don't think transmission would come from staff as much as from other students or outside of the school. And one last thing is that if we decide that masks are not mandated, you still have to look at the school bus transportation, because per the U.S. Department of Transportation, masks are required on public transit, and our school bus is considered a public form of transportation. So I believe masks would be required to be worn by anyone on the school bus. So that's all that we have.
Thank you, Deanna. So do the nurses have an opinion about whether the daily COVID screen should occur or not? I understand the process issues about how to manage the data and all of that, but do you guys have an opinion about whether they should be done or not?
We were all for not having it.
Okay.
So we did like the idea of continuing with other mitigations, you know, the hand washing. I don't know if the hand washing stations are staying at elementary school, but those were a great thing. The hand sanitizers, be cognizant of social distancing and things like that.
Very good. Any questions from the group for the nurses? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Next, how about principals and administration, Anna and or Bethany?
Sure. Let me just share my screen. All right, so the question we really looked at was asking, should a remote option be offered next year for families and under what situations? And so in meeting with the administrators from both the schools and across the SAU, we determined that we can't offer the same remote options that we've been able to offer this current school year, this past school year. The dual modality, teaching in dual modalities is not best for instruction or the learning environment and not sustainable with our current resources. And we also had to reassign every teacher basically in the school to be classroom teachers in order to make this work. If you were going to pursue this option, there'd need to be significant increases in staffing, and there's a financial component to provide for those additional staff members if we had to go that route. We did discuss that for some families, there may be a remote option that would be really helpful for them and really necessary. And we targeted specifically families. There was a medical consideration or extenuating circumstances, which would make it best for the child to stay remote. In looking at this, we would ask families to really select a remote option for the year. And we'd partner with an online institution so that we could do this in a financially responsible way. So something like VLAX that would provide the curriculum and the instruction for the actual learning. And then what the school would provide would essentially be an anchoring adult. So using grant funds or COVID funds to support a remote coordinator. So someone who can be that anchoring adult, that advisor essentially for remote students. So monitoring and checking on their VLAX progress, really connecting them back to the school, meeting on kind of a weekly basis, forming their own little advisory there that would occur potentially across grade levels, or that person could meet with different grade levels of students or by school with students and really help them stay connected, really be a point person for the families to help support them. So that was our initial feedback. And then really looking forward, that we recognize that there's a need to continue to look at this and to continue to investigate over the coming year what longer term sustainable options might be available for remote options and remote learning. What'd I miss, Anna?
You did great. I think the slide does encapsulate everything. We talked about it in a pretty condensed version. Any questions?
I don't have any, but I suspect that perhaps some in the group might. So any feedback or questions from the group? Ms. Kuzma.
So the full year option, we have, as Deanna pointed out, vaccines aren't available yet for students, which, as soon as vaccines become available for some of our medically necessary students, that makes them no longer, or it greatly reduces the risk. So they would not allowed to come back into the schools with the plan that you're suggesting, or, ideas that you're recommending. They would not be allowed to come back into the school once they've been vaccinated. They are out for the year, correct?
Yeah, that's certainly something we can take a look at, especially with kind of the feedback you're giving on that with the vaccination. I think maybe in our heads coming off of this year, it was kind of like the segment 1, segment 2, segment 3. So I think it was more that. I think we're definitely flexible with the 1 year, definitely with that reflection that you're sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ms. Quartz.
So formal. I just had a clarifying question. You're talking about an anchoring adult for each of the students that would be in the remote form. Is that one adult for like all the remote kids? So even the different grade levels would be one person? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, looking at the initial survey numbers with the number of families that were interested in pursuing a remote option, we expect this number overall to be relatively small. So it would be one position to coordinate and act as that anchoring adult.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure teachers didn't have to do, dual duty, because that was.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other feedback or questions? All right, thank you, admin. If you could maybe attach that slide into the card for today's meeting, that'd be just to have it all in the same place. That'd be great. Thank you for that. Moving on to our next subcommittee report. Next on the list is faculty, staff, and associations. Mr. O'Keefe.
Awesome. And I have the world famous Miss Alexis going to help me present today. And we're going to keep it nice and quick. I promise, and I'm sure Liz promises as well. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just talk a little bit about what we captured from a consolidation standpoint, but attached to the Trello board card is more in-depth comments from members of the committee with regards to each one of the 7 questions. And so as a committee, we felt that today we just talk about the high level or the highlights of some of the concerns and thoughts that we had about those 7 questions. And then to dive deeper, we just asked that proper attention be paid to the information that's actually attached to the Trello board. So the members of the committee right there real fast, obviously we've got Amy, Jonathan, Dawn, Zach, Catherine, who is a part of the panel here, Liz, Cheryl, Andy Emerson, and Lisa Eastland have all provided feedback. Immediate feedback at the high school level, obviously one of the things that we wanted to make sure, and that was already mentioned, was the dual modality just cannot continue. It was unfair to the students, unfair to faculty members, and it was extremely stressful for all parties involved. And so whatever we do, we just have to make sure that we address and make sure that that does not happen in the next school year, that a faculty member be in charge of both in-person and remote instruction at the same time, operating on the same parallel segment. Overall, learning was impacted. It wasn't sustainable, but they did it, right? And so that was one of the comments that a member of our high school staff stated, that they got by, they were providing an outstanding experience, but it just wasn't sustainable. The quality of learning was affected. They couldn't maintain the correct pace and get to all the needs of the students. And so capturing and making sure that we're addressing a single form of instructional delivery is just so paramount as we map out the next school year. Liz?
All right. So one of the things that was discussed from the Mount Vernon Village School was that remote choice, that wasn't necessarily a good thing for all students. There was concern around why remote was chosen for different families, whether it was chosen for more of a convenience than perhaps a medical concern, which led us to our next conversation around how do we really identify the circumstance where remote is necessary? What is a validated medical concern? And who's determining that? And then looking into if students were choosing whatever remote option we ended up going with, would they require a 504 or an IEP in order to meet the needs of being remote? And they also echoed the thoughts that teachers were stretched too thin. When you are doing a dual modality or just any of the experiences that we had, I think both in remote and in person, being stretched thin caused us to make sure the kids did have that year of learning that we talked about last summer, but it was not as effective. A concern around if some of our special ed students were to choose remote, how would we support them appropriately? Knowing again that we did the best we could, but making sure we really map that out. And then there was also some points made about just moving forward into next school year that we probably are going to need additional time for the assessment piece because we are having students returning from different modalities, from homeschool, from VLAX, from different places, and they're having different experiences. We may need to really tighten up our assessment process in the fall.
And then Clark Wilkins, the screen's a little bit more busier and smaller font, so I apologize to Mr. Steele. You're gonna have to get your readers out when you examine this a little bit later on. But obviously, one of the questions that were asked was, is VLAX an appropriate option, let alone an option, right? Is that the way that we can go ahead and address the remote piece? I know our administrative team has already addressed that in their presentation. Not having the in-person teach remotely at the same time, same exact feedback at the high school level, not using current staff members to oversee or provide instruction to remote students. We would need to hire an outside person to fulfill that role. It would just be extremely unfair to ask our current staff members to do that for a second year in a row. Protocols and plans should be looked at COVID numbers and levels to towns to support safety decisions, masks, physical distancing, et cetera. I know the nursing team is going to be working on that as well. Enrollment also needs to be considered in creating those safety protocols. Classes between 15 and 16 students. Next year, we're going to have anywhere between 20 and 22 in some of those. Safety cleaning protocols. This is one thing that we're going to have to obviously work with Roger and his team on, is to make sure that there's some supervision, that there's safety and cleaning protocols that are actually implemented. Teachers aren't left cleaning up those classrooms at the end of the day, making sure that our supervisors in our various buildings just go through and do a walkthrough before the end of the night to make sure that maybe a checklist was accomplished. Need to have zones and status, red, orange, and yellow, green, and blue, well defined, perhaps edited for the 21-22 school year, and also have them by building, right? So our elementary schools may have different requirements and criteria than our high school, where there's more opportunity for folks to actually be vaccinated. And so starting off maybe in September or at a different condition level may be warranted if the Delta variant becomes a little bit more pronounced in our community. And then of course, making sure that all of our students and staff have the opportunity to be vaccinated before any of that stuff gets modified or changed. Instructional practices were significantly impacted. This is the feedback that our Clark Wilkins team had provided. And they were impacted by physical distancing requirements, right? No group work, projects, partner work, all that stuff was actually impeded as a result of the distances between those kids. And so getting that stuff reintegrated into the fall and getting folks back and comfortable working one-on-one, whether it be in reading or math, and seeing those positive impacts being returned back to the classroom. The reliance on those strategies is just so pronounced and important, and we need to make sure that we're able to re-implement them. Room setups impacted by last year's protocols, of course, the guidelines 21 to 22, making sure that those are well defined and what that actually looks like. Again, another comment about the cleaning protocols, making sure that supervision is absolutely provided into those classrooms. And of course, most of the cleaning, the feedback was actually done by classroom teachers who are already being taxed and not having to set up planning periods because they were either taking responsibilities that other people would have normally taken care of in a normal year. And of course, select support models. And then of course, last but not least, just making sure that we are capturing more accurate data from parents. Do we need to fill out surveys in terms of who and wants to be remote, making sure that more people are participating in that.
All right, and AMS had some great feedback that their advisory launchpad activities they began this year was really positive, but felt like there were a lot of new initiatives happening at the same time, and that made it challenging to just take on so much in such a very different school year. So they were hopeful that we would not be adding new initiatives so that they can really focus on that launchpad work they were doing, so that they can provide that safe place to that trusted adult for all students and really focus on their SEL work. There was some great feedback about a Google form that was used about how students were feeling, and it was a private form that they were able to fill out on their feelings for the day, and that alerted the counselors that they needed a check-in. And Mount Vernon also reported that was a good tool. So I think looking at reusing that tool and maybe pushing it out more district-wide, that seemed to get a lot of great feedback. And another thing that AMS was super positive about was their wellness fair that they did in the spring, and they said they are planning another one for the fall. Again, I'd love to see something like this broaden through the district. It seemed like it was a great tool for providing not only information but support for students, and students were very open to that opportunity.
And so as a faculty and staff committee, I just obviously want to thank my fellow members here, because I think, giving up your summer for a second year in a row, as is everyone on this call, it speaks a lot to your belief in our community and the fact that you really, embrace your position and your role, you take it seriously, and you really are looking out for the best interests of our kiddos. And as a community member, I sincerely thank them, completely. And it takes a lot of effort to be doing all this stuff on top of the stressful year that you guys had. So thank you. That's all, Mr. Steele, that we had to report.
Thank you to Mr. O'Keefe and to the world famous Liz Alexikos as she was introduced. Any feedback or questions from the group for the faculty, staff, and association members? All right, that was very helpful and very good feedback. Thank you both for that. Next, Tricia Town, who wrangled several hundred parents over these past few weeks to provide us with the parent feedback. So, Ms. Town.
Thank you. Adam, you had asked the parent subcommittee to really focus on understanding what really parents are thinking about for the reentry, and also really welcoming those students who have not been back in since March of 2020, what that would look like for them and how to integrate them back into the schools. So the subcommittee went over kind of question by question and the main highlights as far as what the remote option should be in the fall. It was kind of a mixed bag of answers from parents. They were basically saying if it is done, it should be done well and with limited spending. We found that with just administration and the stakeholders also said that hybrid was really hard on the dual modalities, was hard on teachers and staff. And really looking to see what we did pre-COVID for those homeschool students, 504s, IEPs, private tutoring. What did that look like prior to COVID? Kind of maybe going back to that model. So if it's done, it really should make sure that we're not taking any resources away from those in-person learning, for that 98% that is coming back. That was a big concern not taking resources away for in-person learning, and how can it be done well? If it is done, it needs to be done well and really thought out. Looking ahead for those kiddos, how do we support those learners and deploy staff resources? Again, really try not to take away from those kiddos that are coming back in. That was really a big concern of parents, not putting the stress on the teachers, having them, having all going different ways. And also what effect that may have on class sizes. If we are doing a remote option, will that take a teacher away or what have you? VLAX did come up a lot. So the pairing, what Dr. Bernasconi said about pairing with them does sound like an option that might work for some of the parents that were in this subcommittee as well. Looking for what safety protocols, what are parents looking for safety protocols? Should there be safety protocols? The big mention is really following the guidelines from DHHS, which we have been doing anyway. Really looking towards those coded color, green, orange, yellow, seeing what that would look like, really gave parents some security in what was needed to be done. So really following the guidelines from those above and kind of putting that back into play. Another key component I would say is really welcoming those students back. What are they going to need for support? Looking at that social emotional component was a really big concern of parents. Some of these remote kiddos have not seen their peers or may have not have the availability to communicate with them or share. What is that going to look like for them? So really putting those anchoring adults into play, the social workers, the school counselors, and really having maybe some parent outreach for those kiddos that are coming back in. Whether it be step-up days or orientation later in the summer, but really making sure that those remote kiddos are welcomed back with open arms. That was a big concern. And as well as having in-person and remote kiddos, really integrating everybody back into the system here. Are we looking at the integrated arts being in person, using the cafeteria for the socialization, really just getting back to the norm as much as we can, was a big concern for all parents, I would say.
That was very succinct for given the number of parents who participated in your committee.
Try. And I'll also put that on I have a Google Doc up on the Trello board.
Oh, great. Perfect. Any questions for the parents? Okay. Ms. Daniel, on behalf of the students, and I believe you have a survey that you're also going to summarize as well. Go for it.
Yes. Can I share my screen? Is that on?
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. So to kind of begin to tackle this, given that we have so many students at the school, I decided that the best way to kind of take action would be through a survey, which we sent out to all 6th through 12th graders at the middle school and the high school. And we were able to get 361 responses, which was very exciting. And in this survey, we kind of decided to focus on questions 1, 5, and 6, being that about remote modality, resources that can be provided to students, as well as ways that the social and emotional departments at Souhegan and AMS can help students as we start to return to normalcy this fall. So these were the questions we asked, and I'll put that up on the Trello after this is done. So one of the first things that we asked students was, if there was an option for remote school next year, would you be interested in choosing that modality? Less than 9% of students said that they would be interested in choosing remote school as an option. Reasons for this were that younger middle schoolers weren't comfortable returning because they wouldn't be vaccinated. There was a big concern for flexibility as well as nervousness and anxiety about returning into school after being remote for a whole year. And then we kind of started to shift to question 5 and talked about the social emotional components a little bit, asking students if they felt that the pandemic and the effect that the pandemic had on them affected their mental health at all. So a lot of students noted that they became more lonely during this past year, isolated from students, fellow peers, teachers, staff, Souhegan and AMS communities. They developed anxiety and depression. A lot of students said that, as well as increased stress levels. They did say, though, that teachers did a fantastic job adjusting and helping students throughout the entire step of the way. So kudos to our staff departments on that one. And then there was also a lack of motivation among our student population this year. And then the whole uncertainty didn't sit well with many students because of cancellation of events, sports, things that we can normally count on to bring us joy and happiness in the year. Those were all very uncertain. As far as the ways that the Souhegan and AMS administrations could aid students returning to school in the fall, the biggest thing that people said was normalizing procedures and practices as best as possible before COVID. So bringing back missed activities, easing social distance and mask requirements as best as possible would make kids feel comfortable returning to the building. There were also, some people said, chances to meet teachers before the school year, promoting getting off of computers because this was a very technology heavy year, and being outside during classes, getting out and doing hands-on work and hands-on activities. And then the other thing was maintaining flexibility and willingness to change modalities throughout the year based on the situation with variants and other outside things. As far as counseling goes, many students said that our counseling departments at Souhegan and AMS are doing a great job. But the biggest thing is that they're not advertised, that they also provide mental health help, as well as like college help and scheduling help. So I think that that was the biggest thing there. Lots of students mentioned making mandatory meetings with counselors to kind of create those bonds with students about things that aren't just college and scheduling and school, but learning more about the students so that they can feel that one-on-one personal connection, which will make the student more comfortable to go to the counselor. And then as far as resources just in general, I think students kind of really appreciated wellness days a lot. Bringing back the full wellness day at the high school was one of the biggest things. Taking it slow in the beginning of the school year to allow for a complete transition. Opportunities to access quieter environments, so making those quieter spaces for remote students when they come back in the building, because it's a big adjustment going from your room where nobody else is in it to a big school with 500, 600 rowdy middle schoolers and high schoolers. And then lastly, we asked these two questions, which I have up on the screen. So if you were remote for the entire school year, would you benefit from having an orientation day? So we had more students who were remote say that they were in favor of an orientation day before this year. Then that said no. And then obviously these were the students that were in person all year. And then the other biggest thing is we want to look at Souhegan freshmen and AMS fifth graders, because if they were remote all year, they haven't been inside the building that they are going to be returning to this fall. So they're like freshmen almost, if you think about it that way, because they're new to the school and they're new to the environment. So a lot of those students said that they would actually be in favor of pairing up with an upperclassman buddy who could help show them the ropes a little bit of the school, or have some other system in place that would do the same thing as that. But yeah, that's about it from the student side of things.
I was surprised that close to 9% still are interested in a remote option. That seems high to me. Do you get the sense that, 360 responses is out of probably about 1,200 students, is about a quarter. Do you think it's more likely that students who want a remote option answer the survey, so that would skew the results a little bit? Or do you think that's a pretty, what's your guess on whether that's indicative of the entire body?
So I definitely think that students who are passionate about being remote definitely answered this survey, because it was like the student reopening plan. So I think when people see reopening plan, if they're passionate about staying online, they're more likely to fill it out. I have a feeling most of the students who did not fill it out probably really do not care too much about whether that remote option is being offered. So they're the ones who are more likely to be in person. So I would say in reality, in that 1,200 students in Souhegan and AMS, the percentage is probably a little bit lower.
Got it. Thank you. Feedback or questions for Ms. Daniel? Katie, go ahead.
I was just thinking too, Maddie, was the survey emailed out to students?
Yes, it was emailed out by Dr. Bernasconi at the middle school, as well as Christina Len at the high school. So it was sent out to all returning students from 6th through 12th grades.
Perfect. I was also just thinking, like, I know my own kids are actually in that same age category. And my guess is neither one of them even checked their email to see it. So I am wondering too, if, people don't even know it was there. So you might have, not gotten as many responses from that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too, because it went out right as summer was going in.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Tricia?
I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of what Maddie said about really looking at those transition years, 5th grade, 7th grade for Mount Vernon, and freshmen, really taking a look at those kiddos, anchoring adults coming in, sharing information amongst staff, kind of looking at those kiddos and making sure they have an opportunity to come in early, step-up day, orientation, group tours. But that sentiment was also heard by parents as well. So obviously the parents and kiddos are talking a little bit about that.
Got it. Anybody else? Maddie, thank you. As a student who should be having a lot of fun over the summer and relaxing with friends, the fact that you did such a great job and put so much time into that is very, very appreciated. And we're very lucky to have you be a part of this group. Thank you again. So Shilu from the Social and Emotional Land and Subcommittee, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So we're going to focus on kind of the 3 questions that were more of the social emotional focus. And I'm going to start from the bottom up. The first question was really around whether there should be a remote option. And I think a lot of people have talked about this. There is a very small minority of students who are very interested in remaining remote. And as the folks who are kind of charged with looking at the social emotional reasons for that, I think it's complicated. There are some students who are in fact medically not able to come back, but I think that there was a huge piece of anxiety and anticipatory anxiety about returning back to school and what that would look like. And we as a committee feel like unless very specific cases are targeted, that we would not want a remote option offered. We think that the socialization of students in school is very important to their development and really want to support that moving forward, knowing that we're going to put additional supports in place. I think as it relates to teachers, this also came up amongst other committees. This was a really, really hard year for teachers trying to do the dual modality. And I will say that the teachers across the district were amazing, always came with their best foot forward and were able to provide that. And I really try to tell people we can't keep saying that we lost all this learning. I think in our district in particular, teachers were really excellent at keeping kids moving right along to a place where they needed to be. So I applaud all the teachers for doing that. If VLAX is an option, I think that we need to provide some level of flexibility in terms of students returning to school. That may look like a student is taking some VLAX courses, but taking them at the high school. So maybe they don't feel comfortable being in the classroom yet, but they could be in a smaller, quieter spot, work on some of their VLAX work, and then transition back into the classroom, depending on the age level and what type of supervision we would need to provide for some of those students. As far as resources for those who have been remote since last March, I think that the discussions around transitions is the most important one. At the high school, we generally do something that we've called Sabre Startup for a small portion of students who kind of need an anchor at the school, a little bit more of a leg up. That includes those kids from the middle school, but also any new students who are in 9th grade coming in so that they kind of learn a little bit about it. We've talked about inviting all 8th graders to that this year to make sure that we are providing that kind of as a blanket opportunity. In addition, at the high school, they've taken a couple of summer days and they are working out a freshman orientation that's going to be really Sabre Startup on steroids, but back in school. So it will be very purposeful in the work with the 9th graders. I know that they are doing some work at the middle school as well in terms of Launchpad. We're doing some really clear work with advisory to try to make sure we're connecting with those students who have been out for such a significant portion of time. I think It is recommended from all of us that each school have something in place for students who have been out for the entire year, and at least to offer to say, come in for a half a day. For younger kids, maybe that's playing some games and getting used to being back in the classroom or being in the school again. For middle school and upper level kids, it's going to be more team building, and really just spending some time together. I do know that a lot of students have lost language and how to do this back and forth when they're with one another, and there's much more phone usage. And I think kind of trying to back off of that and normalize being in social situations is going to be important. And we're going to need some professionals in place to help provide that lane for those students as well. And then as far as SEL resources throughout, we've talked a lot about really strengthening community supports that we have. We have great group of people that are leading the SEL train in all of the schools, but we all can't do it alone. And it's going to be a tough year coming back in. So we want to make sure that we are connected with all the people that are in the community who we can reach out to in a little quicker and easier way than having to go through a million steps. So we'll all be working on that over the summer. We've also started at the high school reintegrating some peer-driven supports on the mental health front, and I think that will also be helpful in terms of students. We are going to need to make sure that the anchoring adult has some training, knows what they're doing, knows that this is going to be an important time for them to make sure that they are connecting not only with students, but with parents. Parents are going to be anxious about sending their kids back to school. And we need to be cognizant of that too. So I think having some parent meetings at each school level in the very beginning to provide some of that back and forth with some of the professionals at the school will also be helpful. Okay, I'm trying to be succinct. So that's what I'm going to say for now. There's a lot that we could do, I think. So
that was well done, Sheila, being succinct. Any thoughts or questions from the group as this apparent thunderstorm is making everyone look darker on the screen? It's kind of remarkable, actually. So any thoughts or questions? Stephen?
Yes, the only thing I just was going to ask is if you could make sure or maybe work with the SEU administration to kind of push into the return to school, the PD time before school or classes start, just to engage our faculty and our staff from a social emotional standpoint for them, their mental health, maybe get some time on the calendar so you guys can take the floor and just talk about cues and clues to look out amongst peers. And then of course, to address the students' concerns as they're starting to come back as well. Do some maybe refreshers in terms of the cues and clues for stuff to look for anxiety and all those things that so many people are good at identifying, but making sure that we're doing it purposefully in the professional development time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. We definitely want to do that. We want to do some suicide prevention work too before school starts, make sure that everybody has that in the forefront of their mind with staff. And then also we have lots of different people coming into our schools. I know at the high school level, we've had a pretty big changeover. So we want to make sure that we're showing people who their supports are, faculty in particular, who their supports are, and make them feel comfortable going to those folks as well.
I would just say, Sheila, I think all of those plans are things that working with building administration, your fellow administrators and fellow social workers in other schools, you guys can start. I mean, like, you don't need to wait for the plan to be considered done or any of that. I think we're all in support, and whatever planning needs to be done in preparation for the fall. You have my support. I think you've got this committee's support. So I would say go at it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, that's all of our subcommittees. Thank you for all of that. So I'm just going to ask, I'm going to call these some kind of gut check questions. So I want to see like people's initial reactions to see if I've heard things well. As I start to draft the plan, it'll be really helpful to kind of get a sense from you guys right away if I'm on the right path or not. So I don't have to wait until the next meeting to then have you tell me I started going down the wrong path. So just hearing all of your feedback so far and reading some of the written feedback I've received already. Initially, I was thinking that perhaps we wouldn't need the color-coded system for this coming school year, but I think I'm actually wrong on that. It sounds like it might be helpful and provide some continuity for our families and for teachers if we continued with the color coding status system and maybe made tweaks to the existing statuses as we've talked about. So I guess, thumbs up or down, or however you want to tell me, or, wave at me, log off if you're so mad you can't even stand what I just said, but okay. But it sounds like there's general consensus that the color-coded system probably needs to stay. What I like about that is it allows us the flexibility. Anyone else hear that thunder just now? That's that allows us to have the flexibility for as conditions or if conditions change to do something that families will remember from this previous year. So I like that. That's good. It's one question that we haven't really pressed in on a whole lot is, are there, and I haven't heard too many comments, there were some written comments from the faculty, staff, and associations group that I read. But do we do something different at the elementary level because they're not able to have vaccines quite yet? So, for example, if as of today, if I had to pick a color status for us based on all of your feedback and what I know, it's at least green and perhaps even the blue status of near normal operations in our schools. If that was the case this fall, but students at Clark Wilkins and Mount Vernon Village School are unable to get vaccinations, do we have a different color-coded status for that school because of that? So just a question for the group on that one kind of really very particular point. Stephen, then Deanna, then Katie, and then Liz.
I would actually say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would actually say yes. It's important that we do recognize that a situation at Sohegan High School may be completely different than something at the Mount Vernon Village School from an age standpoint, who's eligible for vaccinations, and having the community aware of potential issues through our color-coded system. So if we felt that based on data that as a parent I may not know directly, but you as a school may know through the nursing staff, that we need to actually go into a more restrictive status to have that flexibility, but that may not still be the same case at the high school. So I fully support the color-coded system, and then make it at a building level so parents can be better informed.
And just to clarify, so would the building level designation, would that be obviated once students at every building are able to get vaccinated, or do you still believe even after that we would still might have different statuses for different buildings? What's your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, information and transparency is vital to the community and to faculty and staff and to parents and students. And so us continuing the color-coded system through the end of the year next year would give us as a community better information about what's going on behind the scenes, and being transparent with case counts, concerns at the state level that are coming down, mask mandates if they're going to be revisited with this Delta variant. As more and more people become vaccinated, I think the issues that we think of today as being at the forefront will probably go to the back burner. And so I don't know if we'll need to go to a more restrictive status as more and more of our student population becomes vaccinated. But I think the color-coded system is vital to the transparency issue.
Got it. Thank you. Some of you folks did not use the raise hand, so I might have forgotten the order, but I think it was Deanna, then I forget who's before Liz, but Deanna, who else was after Deanna? Deanna, sorry, Katie, thank you. So Deanna, Katie, Liz, Bethany. Go ahead, Deanna.
I think that the color coding system is good, but it's got to be kind of fluent. People have to realize things are not set in stone. I put that in the comment. But I also worry about if we started, let's say, a blue level, that's not a lot of precautions at all. And let's say someone has COVID and we have to quarantine, and I think we're going to get more of a feedback from parents, a little bit harder about making some changes, adding mitigation on. I'd rather start with there a little bit more mitigation and continue to take things away. I just don't want people to get so lax that they think that this COVID is totally gone. It's not. It's here for a while, and I just worry that it's going to be too not taken seriously or given us a hard time if we have to call to have kids tested or adults tested.
Got it. Katie.
Yeah, Adam, I was just commenting on like the different colors for different schools. And we talked about that might be okay for this year just because of exactly what you were saying with, you know, high school students and part of middle school being able to be vaccinated and our population not. So I think it really depends on that and like the community numbers. You know, Wilkins and maybe, I don't know how it would work at AMS because it's like half and half, but we might have a different color than the high school at the beginning of the year. And, you know, same with mitigation strategies. It might look different at all of the schools.
All right. Thank you for that. Liz.
Yeah, I'm actually all set. I just wanted to reiterate that in our committee, we talked about really looking at those community numbers, like overall, and looking at where the community is, and then trying to figure out where we fall. And just using, again, that coded system makes sense to people. They've lived it. They know it. It's maybe not the time to totally get rid of it.
Thank you, Liz. I'll call on, as Siri calls her, Dr. Bernaskany.
So I like the color-coded system. My only caution is this, is that what each color means, I think will be drastically different this year than it has been in the past. And so that might be confusing. Not that I think we need to reinvent a whole other system, but you know, yellow isn't going to be what yellow was. Green won't be what green was. And part of that is because if we are operating on an in-person model, many of those mitigation strategies we won't be able to employ. So for example, we were able to socially distance in classrooms because we had reassigned teachers to bring class sizes down. We will have 24 students, 22 students in a class next year. You can't do 6 foot spacing like that. So if we move to a color level that requires social distancing, there's just going to be a lot of caveats in there and a lot of caveats with the vaccinations and things like that. So I don't know if it's helpful to stay with the same colors or if it's and just retraining or if it's a different scale. But I just think that that's going to be an important point of clarification.
As a guy, I basically use all the color names I know already. So if we're going to have to get out a Crayola crayon box, I'm going to need help. So I will say that if we don't stick with the same color names.
Cerulean blue, I don't know.
I don't know what you're talking about. You lost me. You lost me at fuchsia. So let's see. Beth next, and then Anna Peril.
I just wanted, Katie touched on it really quick, but didn't quite go all the way there. The middle school is split 50-50 with students that can be vaccinated as of right now and students that can't. So there might be some special consideration at AMS. Maybe, I don't know how the abilities to keep things separated. Maybe it is the middle school might need 2 separate color codes, maybe not. I'm throwing out an option of something to just think about.
That makes sense. Anna Peril.
So just reiterating what everybody said, I think the color coding is great, but I think we can go back and kind of delineate different changes with that. And back to Clark Wilkins, I think it's fine having different color status or things that we might need to do different. Like even this year with our different start time, it's what was best for our kids and what we needed. And I think being able to flex that way, just as long as the parents have a heads up. So I support it.
Okay. Really helpful gut check on that. So the next one I'll ask of the group is it's Shilu's group said it most directly, but it sounds like everyone is suggesting it, that remote options for students are going to be limited significantly as in comparison to last year where they were not. So what that looks like and how we determine medical need or all of that is something I think I get to wrestle with for the next couple of weeks and bring back to you guys for feedback. But it sounds like the consensus is that we are going to be actually affirmatively advocating or encouraging students to be in person whenever possible. Is that the feedback I'm hearing in general? Okay. That's also helpful. Another very clear piece of feedback I want to just confirm with everybody is while our teachers performed a Herculean effort this past year, and many did two things at the same time, that we are going to avoid that at an absolute point of view for this coming year, meaning we are just going to do everything it takes to make sure teachers don't have to do that again. Is that also a consensus? Okay. Katie Kennedy disagrees. You liked doing both at the same time. Is that what you wanted to, do you want to speak to
Didn't
that?
have to do that, thankfully, but I feel bad for those that did.
All right. And then I think perhaps the last thing I just want to gut check as I start to sketch this this plan out. I think we're doing away with segments. My sense is that segments last year were needed because of the remote to in-person shift, but I think this coming year, what I experienced last year was I had this like grand idea that I'd be able to say what the status was going to be like 2 weeks from now. Well, that proved to be foolish because there's no way for me to know that. So, and I went to my tarot card reader. I went to my, even tried a Ouija board, but still couldn't get the future figured out. So this coming year, it sounds like we're not going to have a need for that with segments, and that our change in color levels will be based on like real world conditions. And we'll give, like, if we have to make any major shifts, like God forbid we have to go back into a remote status for, we'll do our best to deal with that as it comes up. We'll, give as much warning, but it sounds like the need for segments is no longer necessary. Is that, you guys agree, disagree? Okay. Cool. All right. Well, hey, I've got what I think I need to begin this process of drafting something. So this was supremely helpful work so far, because I can't imagine trying to draft something without that feedback you guys provided. So thank you for that. I will work on that. Are there any final questions or comments before I let you guys batten down the hatches in your homes and prepare to fly away to Kansas? Stephen.
Can you just restate the timeline in terms of when we should be meeting again to review documents that you prepare when?
Indeed. So let's see, today is June 30th. July 14th is our next meeting at 4, and I'll provide you with a draft either then or slightly before that date. And then we're meeting again on July 21st as a task force. And so between the 14th and the 21st is when the subcommittees will need to meet to review those plans.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Hey, thank you all. Enjoy your evening. Thanks for your time. Thanks to the public for tuning in, and I will see you again soon. Take care.